Rage of the Abyss releases on October 11th. This set strengthens some of the best decks in the game with new engines, updates to old ones, and new staples that flip the metagame on its head. My name's JaxLMS, and I know everything because they pay me to. Here's But first, we need to talk about Sans. Nah, I'm fucking with you. Just subscribe. Surfacing Big Jaws can summon itself if you've activated a spell this turn, searches a fish-type shark on summon, and can be used as a 3 or 5 for an Xyz summon. Drake Shark, I'm just gonna rattle off some Drake jokes here, just pick whichever one is your favorite. A Minor Shark, BBL Drizzy Shark, Sick Shark with Sick Thoughts, Josh Shark, Josh Shark, Secret Daughter Shark, The Shark Part 6, Drake Shark Poplars itself, can be treated as 2 materials for the Xyz summon of a water monster that needs 3, and bequeaths to a Shark Drake Xyz it's under the effect to detach 2 to suck up a back row. Armored Shark is treated as an Armored Xyz card, can extra foolish a water Xyz to reborn a fish with that level, and during your opponent's turn can equip itself from grave to a water Xyz. Aquajet Surface reborns a level 4 or lower, what are we calling this tri-type? We're calling them Water Boys. It can reborn a level 4 or lower Water Boy, and can banish itself to boost a Water Boy by 1000. Reincarnate Unveiling Male is treated as an Armor Xyz card, gives an Xyz monster its equipped to Battle Protection and this weird battle-related Quick Xyz effect, and during the end phase can equip itself from grave to an Xyz you control. Virtue Stream is Blackout for Water Boys, and can banish itself from grave to either protect a water monster from a card effect, or soak a non-water monster. Xyz Poseidon Splash can be activated if you control an Xyz with an Xyz monster attached to it, to declare an attribute and destroy all monsters of that attribute that don't have an equip spell on them. And you can banish it from grave and detach a material to reborn a water boy to either field. The Virtue Dragon is a rank 3 that searches Virtue Stream on summon, and can either detach a material from any of your Xyz to fish a water boy out of the barrel, or Nexus apparently. And number C32 Shark Drake Levice can rank up onto any rank 4 Shark Drake by pitching a spell, attacks twice, pierces, and can quick effect detach a material to imperm and 0 an opponent's monster. Shark has long been on the fringes of playability. They have a few serviceable starters, and the payoffs certainly have a bit of range, but this wave improved some of the consistency issues, giving the deck more starters and a more cyclical web of searchability. Bigger Jaws can search both Buzzsaw and Abyss Shark, and can be searched by either of them as well, meaning you have pretty much unrestricted access to all 3 of your playmakers off of any one of them. Even though Buzzsaw stops you from using its search, you can still get to that effect later in the turn by adding it back from grave with La Virtue. As long as you use a spell at some point, Jaws can summon himself there and grab Abyss or One Dance. And that spell can even be something like Small World that searches Jaws, or Goods which you can use to get to Jaws through Abyss. So in some respects, these cards function as E-tellies for Jaws. Certified Shark Boy is not as good. He might be evocative of Poplar, but unlike Fire Watapon, whose other 2 effects revolutionize Snake Eye, Degrassi over here just kinda lets you summon number 32. The Inherited effect gives you the option to suck up your own set full armored Xyz, so you have a way to get it into the graveyard without having to leave up the materials for an Xyz summon, but that's about it. He's searchable and therefore summonable by Abyss and Jaws, so he has his place, but his place is just very specifically underneath a copy of number 32. Speaking of armored Xyz, this set has gifted us with 2 new options to search with Fortress, whose main drawback up till now was sometimes needing 2 search targets and only having 1 that you were willing to touch with a 10-foot pole. Armored Shark being a wolf bark is neat, but not really ideal since he can't summon himself. You can search him all you want, but getting him from the hand to the field is not really something you can do unless you're on, like, Lantern Shark. Equipping himself to Lancer is good, but you've already got that role covered by Full Armored, so he doesn't really have a place right now. Believe it or not though, Unveiling Male is playable because it's a spell card. Not only does a freely activatable spell card mean you can use Jaws to summon itself after going through the Armored Xyz line, it also means you'll always have a spell to discard to summon Levice. Since Lancer can add back mail after it falls off whatever you equipped it to, you can even use it to enable both interactions in the same turn. And then at the end of the turn, it'll come back to the field to give battle protection to whatever your smallest or most important end board piece is. And that brings us us to our new endboard pieces. Levice certainly exists. A quick imperm is something, and definitely diversifies your interruptions a bit from the chain blockable Toad, so that's I guess the main argument to using ranking through the 6 with my woes and another 4 to make him instead of just another Bahamut or Kragan. LaVirtue can be cheated out with Bahamut or by using some of your sharks that can embellish their levels a bit to make a rank 3, and can Surge Virtue Stream, adding a back row based disruption to your endboard. Can't really complain about having to pop one of your own guys when the deck is known for leaving used up Bahamuts lying around on the field, and what luck that LaVirtue makes it easier to use up that Bahamut by appropriating its second material to either safely store under a more deserving Xyz monster, or to grab something like Jaws or Amora out of the depths. This also gives you more control over how many materials you want to put on Fortress, so you never get stuck with not enough targets left in deck to be able to legally rank him up. So to sum up, Sharks can now end on Toad, an Imperm, a Suck Up, a Kragan, and an Icarus attack that also either protects or fucks up attributes. The problem is that even with improved consistency, they can't really do all of this. They can maybe get to 4 of them in greedier combos, but at a certain point either the summons dry up or your zones get too clogged to keep making more Xyz. And that's without even getting into how if you lead with a 4th summon Toad, your options off the 1-card combos kinda cap out at Toad Lancer. Almost gotta envy the OCG not having Toad and having no choice but to do the balls to the wall 5 interruptions 1-card combo that loses to Nib. Lucky bastards. Talking about this deck gives me a headache and I don't want to think about it anymore. Oh, also there's a water channeler now. Do you remember the channelers? This is the water channeler. That was everything you need to know about the water channeler. Lacrima, the Crimson Tears, treated as a Fiendsmith, mills a Fiendsmith card on summon, and during your opponent's turn can shuffle itself back from grave to reborn a Fiendsmith Link. Fiendsmith's Agnum Day is a Link 3 that requires a Light Fiend that quick effect reborns a Light Fiend and equips itself to that monster, giving it 600 times the Link rating of all Link monsters equipped to it, and piercing. Lacrima is a welcome addition to the family, being an Armageddon Knight for anything from an Engraver you can summon back, a Track to Fuse, or even Paradise so you can use the Extra Foolish as an extra interruption. If it's your normal summon, you can mill Engraver, make Requiem, summon another Engraver, and revive the first one, letting you make Caesar on the 5th summon, or sequence with the material for Desiree Engrave. Meanwhile, if you start with a closed Heaven line for Requiem, now you can summon Crimson from deck, who will set up Engraver to summon itself, meaning Requiem on his own now translates to 2 bodies instead of just 1. But wait a minute! We could already do that. The benevolent god of the United States, Jerome McHale, gifted the American people Necroquip Princess, both as a means of making Moon full combo on its own, and preserving rank 6 lines after they had to burn Lacrima at the stake for 34 counts of felony slow play. If you'll reference my previous no, not that one. Necroquip already lets you turn Requiem summon into 2 bodies by burning Engraver effect, can still be made into sequence, and can still be a material for a rank 6, which can be Ptolemy, so you still get your search for Tract even though Lacrima add-back is dead. The one singular difference that Crimson Tear makes on lines for the TCG is 1 more Light Fiend Engrave, which to be extremely fair, actually might be the difference. It means you don't have to make Ptolemy and go through Lurie to have enough materials in the trash to make Desiree, but the point stands that unlike in the OCG where this card did kind of make a big functional difference on Fiendsmith, in the TCG she's kind of just this weird side grade that maybe changes some ratios. Agnum is just Light Fiend weird. As far as I can tell, the idea they're going for here is that you can link off Crimson for sequence, sequence summon Desiree, link off the sequence in Desiree for Agnum, then link off the Agnum for some indeterminate link 4, and then on your opponent's turn fire Crimson to bring back Agnum, then Agnum to bring back Desiree. So you get a generic unnamed Link 4 Democrat and a 3-negate Desiree that gets to wait safely in the graveyard for your opponent to run out of board breakers before making his return to the field. Only problem is, Desiree is supposed to be one of your main ways of protecting the rest of your board from those breakers. He's not really the trump card himself, he's a bit more of a supporting role, the Incineroar of the end board. But all this is kind of ignoring the fact that when we talk about these plays, we're not talking about one deck. We're talking about all of them. For an example of where Agnum shines the most, you can look at Millennium, where storing Desiree in the graveyard will let you keep it even after Ankh obliterates your own board. Crimson can be summoned from deck with Ariane in Labyrinth, and being a level 4 complements Engraver's 6 for the purpose of making Chaos Angel. And I'm sure when Pure Fiendsmith becomes a real deck that can actually be built, both of these cards will be vital to the strategy. Metal Illusionist sets a Metalmorph trap on summon, then draws a card if Max Metalmorph is in your grave, can change its type until your opponent's end phase, and increases its level by 4 during your opponent's turn. Zoa the Fiendish Beast can be normal without tributing if your opponent controls a monster, can special itself from hand in defense position, then let your opponent summon a monster if you don't have Max Engrave, and once per turn can set a Metalmorph trap. Max Metalmorph tributes a monster to summon a Nomi from deck that mentions Max Metalmorph, then equips to it, giving it +4/+4 and protection from monster and spell effects. Metal Zoa X must be someone with Max, tributing a level 5 or higher fiend, can reveal itself from hand to set a Metalmorph trap, then return to the deck, and up to twice per turn when your opponent uses a monster or spell effect, can pop a monster they control. Red Eye's Black Full Metal Dragon must be summoned by Max, tributing a high-level dragon, can reveal itself to set another Metalmorph trap, and can Omni Negate, then burn equal to one of your opponent's attack position monsters. Incoming Machine searches a monster that mentions Max, or a Metalmorph trap, yeah, baby! And if you've got Morph face up, you can banish it to stop defense an opponent's monster. Time Engine is treated as a Metalmorph trap, and if a monster you control is destroyed by your opponent, can bring it back, then if it was a high-level machine, and you've got another Metalmorph around here somewhere, wipes your opponent's board and burns them for its attack. These cards can set a Metalmorph trap from deck. Okay. So as a pure strategy, this deck is pretty past the ball to the Italians. Since OG and Rare Metalmorph are mostly just attack boosters and Time Engine is entirely reactive, pretty much the only thing these cards do is set Max. And since it's hard once per turn, setting more than one doesn't really do much. The best one at setting it is Illusionist, which can get a draw on follow-up turns once you've already run through a copy, and also can be either a level 5 Fiend or a Dragon, depending on whether you want Red Eyes or Zoa. And, wait a minute, a Fiend? If you make Illusionist a Fiend, you can do the whole Fiendsmith line and end on Desiree with Max set. So after you use the negate, you can send Desiree to summon Metal Zoa, triggering Desiree to send a card, and putting your sick double-popping Digimon on board. That's probably your best play in Pure, even though it means you won't have the option of making Full Metal, which is far stronger than Zoa. You can still go for it if you draw a Bystial. That pivots us nicely to the much more relevant application of this deck, which is good old Dragon Link, every day until I die. Like Meteor before it, Full Metal fills the niche of second Black Metal search that isn't dogshit, because for years you've been able to trigger Black Metal at least twice in a Dragon Link combo after reborning it with the Red MD you used the first search on, but unlike Meteor, which is just another extender that you need to play Psy-frames for, Full Metal can set up a goddamn Omni Negate, something Dragon Link has been starved for ever since the usual suspects got rotated. You do have to play 2 soft bricks for it, but anything to get back out of Fiend Link's shadow, I guess. On the topic of Fiend, I guess you can play Zoa and Loubob, but it's not like you have a really good way to search it, and it's just 2 pops, so I don't know why you'd bother. Maybe if the deck doesn't adhere to the rigid constraints of cards summoned in this one random duel in Duelist Kingdom, we'll get more max targets of different types that diversify what the engine can do. Or maybe we'll just get a second playable Metalmorph. Either one works for me. Primite Imperial Dragon needs a normal monster to tribute summon over, can quick effect reveal itself to normal a Primite during your opponent's turn, and on summon Dark Rulers your opponent, then banishes all monsters with the same type and attribute as a vanilla in your grave. Primite Lordly Load searches a Primite card, boosts vanillas and Primites by 300 for each different vanilla and grave, and can summon a normal monster from hand, deck, or grave, but lock you out of special summon monster effects for the rest of the turn. Roar can pay 2k to summon a vanilla from deck, and give normals battle protection for the turn, and when your opponent normal summons, you can banish it from grave to banish a monster your opponent controls with lower attack than a vanilla you control or engrave. Drill Beam negates and banishes a card on the field if you have a vanilla or a Primite in your hand or on your field, and if you control a Primite, can set itself from grave. And Howl summons a vanilla from deck or graveyard, and can banish itself from grave to steal a monster with more attack than a vanilla on field or in grave. This deck sorta has the opposite problem from Metalmorph. There's quite a few suitable payoffs that can both interrupt and break boards, but there's only one searcher that they all have to funnel through. Your best line in Pure is probably to use Lordly Load to grab Dragon, then use the second effect to summon a vanilla to tribute over on your opponent's turn. The fun part then is finding the perfect type and attribute combination to match with the most of the metagame possible for Imperial Dragon's Banish. The negate everything part of the effect is fine, but awkward because it's an on-summon trigger that'll match up poorly into most effects. You can't say that on Twitter or they'll kill you though. Meanwhile, if you choose the Fire Fiend Dokuro Yaiba as your vanilla, the Banish effect will hit the majority of Yubel, Snake Eye, and Fiendsmith monsters. Also, its middling attack stat makes it kind of work equally well with both Roar and Howl. Or you could ignore all that and mamma mia, here we go again, just summon White Dust on with Roar and do Fiendsmith combo. Yeah, the much more heavily experimented use for these cards is just as unexpected die with the Roar banish as a little added bonus. Since Lordly Load only locks you out of activating effects, you can even end a turn by reviving the Dust on as one last link material. But you do, I guess, lose the ability to use your end board to negate Nibiru. Fiendsmith is one option, but there's also Genus Loci. Maybe the 2k down payment is a bit much if you're trying to use any of the Aroma cards that need your life to be higher than your opponent's, but if you're that in on Aroma, you probably can make that deficit back in no time, so who cares. You can also play this shit in Blue Eyes and Dark Magician and Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters anime. We're bringing whimsy back to everything you need to know. Abyss Rhine, the Atlantean spirit, is treated as a mermail, contribute itself from hand and another Merlantian from hand or field to either search or summon any level 7 water boy, and can banish itself from grave and pitch a card during your opponent's turn to draw a card. Mermail Shadow Squad is treated as an Atlantean, can pitch a card to make all your water monsters level 7, and if it's sent to the graveyard as cost for a water, can summon a level 4 or lower Merlantian from deck. Abyss-Sting of Triana summons a Merlantian from hand or graveyard, gives it an extra life, and can banish itself from grave to shuffle back 3 water boys. Poseidra Abyss, the Atlantean Dragon Lord, needs 3 level 7s but can rank up on top of Merlantian Xyz, can detach 2 materials and send a water from hand or deck to bounce 3 cards your opponent controls, and if it goes to the grave, can pitch a card to summon 3 water boys from hand or grave. And Mermail King Neptibus protects waters it points to from targeting, either searches or equips an Abyss-equip spell when a water monster is sent to the grave as cost, and if your opponent destroys it, searches a Merlantian. After something like 10,000 years, Konami has finally admitted that Mermail and Atlantean are the same deck. To be honest, I have no idea who they even thought they were fooling. Like, at least Fire King and Fire Fist had pretty much completely unrelated gimmicks. But now here's some waters that need to be sent as cost, and some guys that need to send waters as cost. No need for a paternity test, they look nothing alike. These cards give Mermail the extra gas it needs to keep up with the modern field. Abyss Rhine and Shadow Squad both give you new ways to trigger your Atlanteans for high-value plays. Rhine can grab Abystius or Agrarian Ran, both of which can pitch an Atlantean to extend, or it can summon Coelacanth if you're still a true believer. Its graveyard effect gives you a good way to trigger heavy infantry in your opponent's turn for a pop, similar to Abyss Alacia, but instead of eating up an extra deck slot, taking 2 materials, and not really doing anything else, this play gets to be a solid bonus on top of a card you're already playing. She's not searchable with Dragoons, but you can get her with the Atlantean formerly known as Prince, or with Abyss Pike. And you can summon Abyss Pike with Shadow Squad, which is both an Atlantean you can send with Prince, and a Sea Serpent you can search with Dragoons. You can also sometimes use it as a way to start combos by pitching something like Deep Sea Minstrel and summoning Prince from deck, and the effect to make all your shit into 7s makes Abyss Gaios and Poseidra easier to access, and in doing so makes it easier to smuggle Moulin Glacia off the field without skipping your next battle phase. That's a nice segue into Poseidra, whose board breaking effect is definitely strong, but whose main draw is being Soul Charge upon being linked off for King Neptibus. If you summoned him normally using 3 level 7s, most of which probably set to 7 by Shadow Squad, it's pretty much just a refund, giving you a single extra body more than you would have had otherwise. But if you summoned him on top of an Abyss Gaios or an Abyss Trite that you summoned with Bahamut Shark, now you're going +2 or 3 every time you resolve it. Multiply that over a game and I'm kicking your butt. Multiply that over a match, you're toast. Multiply that over a whole tournament, my entire board is different than it would have been otherwise. And since this effect is not even once per turn, you can usually resolve it twice in a turn, once by cheating it out on top of a different Xyz, and once with 3 bodies that have been photoshopped into 7s by Shadow Squad. And then there's King Neptibus, which, in addition to protecting most of your board from targeting, also gives you a new way to access your Abyss-spells, letting you add a Magician's right hand, Magician's left hand, or Magician's third leg to your board, or search Triina to use as an extender. Since you can trigger it on either turn, you could very easily grab Triina on your turn while setting up your board, and then get Mizuchi on your opponent's turn for a spell negate. Or you could get Mizuchi on your turn, negate your opponent's first spell with it, then trigger Neptibus to re-equip it from grave, giving you a second spell negate. All put together, this deck can easily make boards with a wide variety of interruptions, including Mizuchi, Abyss Gaios, and Toad, and even some room to splash in other water engines like Ice Barrier or Sharks to dip their toes in even more Synchro or Xyz options. Part of the Blue Eyes is always treated as a Millennium, can be discarded to search Millennium Ankh, can't be stolen, and once per duel in which you have activated Millennium Ankh, when your opponent summons a monster with 3,000 or more attack and or 8 or more stars, can send that monster and summon itself from the graveyard. More consistency wasn't exactly what Millennium needed, since they already had somewhere between 700 billion and 1,300,000,000,000 billion ways to Ankh already, but I guess this is a way to get it without paying 6,000 life points. What's more important is that he's another interruption for the deck that isn't entirely tied to Unstoppable. All the power of a Millennium board is kinda centralized within the one big guy, especially if you went for Fires of Rage instead of Obliterate turn 1. Blue Eyes is not a perfect imitation of Promethean Princess, but it very well can come up. Against Snake Eye, you can kill their Flamberge, which will trigger it, but you can do it. You can kill any Yubel monster non-destructively, that's big. All in all, it's not a perfect solution to any of the deck's issues, but alongside Rabbit, which can get you an interruption that's safe from Ankh, and the new Fiendsmiths that can set up Desiree, this card is part of a much more diverse end board for Millennium that'll maybe be a bit more robust than Exodia Pass. Anarchist Monk of the 6 Samurai is a level 3 tuner that can summon itself if you control a Sam, searches a 6 Sam quick play when it's sent from the field to the graveyard, and bequeaths upon a 6 Sam Synchro that uses as material a continuous effect that reduces the level of all monsters your opponent controls by 1. Tactical Trainer is a level 2 tuner that summons itself, searches a 6 strike card when it goes to the grave, and gives a synchro that uses material Intimidate. 6 strike double assault either reborns a Sam, books an opponent's monster, or both if you control 2 or more 6 Sams, and you can banish it from grave to add back a Sam. Legendary Lord 6 Samurai Anishi is a generic level 6 synchro that banishes Sams from grave on summon to bounce that many opponent's monsters, and when it hits the grave, summons back a banished Sam. And Legendary Lord 6 Samurai Shi-En searches a 6 Sam or Xian monster on summon, negates and destroys a monster effect once per turn, and can protect himself by destroying another monster you control. These cards add a lot of strong extension and consistency to Six Samurai, while also giving you some new in-engine disruptions. Anarchist and Trainer both summon themselves as freely as Six Samurais can, and float regardless of whether they were synced or linked off. Anarchist can search asceticism, which is like a scuffed E-Telly with some janky small world elements that might force you to play some samurais that are at best functionally vanillas, and at worst are vanillas. Although we did just have a whole segment on how maybe vanillas are cool now, but I digress. You can also search Cunning, which can help you dodge Imperm, or just artificially perform an extra summon of a Six Samurai for no particular reason. Trainer can search Triple Impact to themed Lightning Storm or Thunder Blast, which can pop or bounce, but the best option is probably just Double Assault, which serves multiple functions as both another extender, and a Book of Moon that's strong both going first and second. Anishi is a bit awkward. He'd be really crazy if there was a good way to quick synchro for him. He's still a great board breaker, threatening to bounce the whole board away if your opponent can't keep your board clear of 6 stars of material, and then being able to summon something back when you link him off. And then there's the big guy. Xian gives you a method to protect your combos early from interruption, while also immediately searching whatever the best extender for the moment is to keep the combo rolling. Being a soft once per turn, you can make a second one so that if you need to burn the first one early to stop a nib, you can still keep the later portions of your combo safe from Ash. And then when your opponent's turn rolls around, you've got 2, possibly 3 monster negates for them to play through. That is, if they get a turn at all. While this wave does give you more options for building a board, the lack of restrictions on any of these cards does nothing to stop them from being more support for the infinite gateway loops that will always exist as long as gateway is legal in its current form. The one list I saw trying these new cards out was attempting to deck your opponent out 1 card at a time with number 104 Masquerade after first going through Dweller to turn off their graveyard effects so the mills couldn't accidentally help them. All supported on the back of the OCG's 3 copies of Daigusto Emerald. We saw a few months ago that Konami has the capacity to create support that incentivizes you to stop doing the obnoxious and unfair win con if they feel like it, so where was that energy with this one? All I see here is even more extenders that put counters on gateway, and a big monster negate to make it even harder to stop the infinite loop from going off. Centurion Shamia is a dark pyro that can summon itself out of the back row, and when your opponent activates a monster effect as Chainlink 2 or higher, can replace their effect with letting you push back one of your Centurions. Centurion Primera Primus is a level 8 synchro tuner that searches an emblema on summon, then can pop a card on each field. And when your opponent removes one of your Centurion cards, can reborn herself. Well, if nothing else, this does directly address what I talked about last time with Emblema being an archetype exclusively for tax incentives. Having a generic level 8 searcher for Oath makes it easier than ever to use generic means to access your Centurion engine, but also makes it easier to extend through Trudea being negated and stuck on field as a level 4. And beyond just getting your normal turn 1 board, there's quite a few upsides to running through her as well. Searching Oath gives you a direct line to Atri, which will be online to draw. Salvation is a good extra piece of disruption that also has utility going second. And speaking of going second, the Scrap Dragon effect lets you break a bit of the board while getting your combo rolling, so she's good for that as well. She can even manage her stand-up summon, being both an interruption and follow-up like a happy medium between Legadia and Auxilia. Chimeria is not as much of a game changer. She's a second pyro monster for the deck, so you can sort of do a second thing with Bonfire if that somehow still makes the cut. As part of an end board, she can certainly be threatening, letting you sort of punish your opponent for trying to chain block by making them play into a negate that only works if they're chain blocking. More importantly though, she can act as like a mini Called by the Grave to stop Ash or Valor on your Primera. However, it must be noted that this does nothing to stop open game state Nibiru or even Valor on the resolution of Auxilia just to suppress the place effect. Don't even get me started on Infinite Impermanence. Not a perfect protective element, but probably a playable one. Without Calamity, Centurion is still in the process of redefining itself, maybe forming a stronger coalition with White Forest, or falling back into more of an engine role in decks that can make 12s, but these cards at least give the deck a little more to do on its own. Valmonica Hereditare is a counter trap that Omni negates and destroys if you control a Valmonica Link monster, and can banish itself from grave to shuffle back any number of Valmonica cards, then draw a card for every 3. Ah, they did it again! Another 20 trillion to the deck ceiling, but still no 1 card. Literally nothing else to say. It's Infernity Barrier. Barrier is a good card. Also really fucking good for follow-up. But the consistency is just not keeping up with the potential. Not to mention it's a counter trap instead of a normal trap, so if you get only 1 into rotation, you run the risk of not having anything to do with Zebufera. Momentalclan Akihiran summons itself from graveyard when your memento is destroyed, can give level 9 or higher memento monsters the ability to attack directly on summon, and when it's destroyed can add back a memento from grave or banished.
What a weird little guy.
I was at Nats when this thing first got revealed, so I was able to talk directly to my server's memento player about it, and their first impression of it amounted to, TK. The most tangible ways this card will affect the deck is by giving you more ways to add back traps you've milled with Creation King and Goblin, as well as being another way to gain board presence off a destruction effect. You can also pop it with Fusion's Graveyard effect to search a trap, then use the float effect to add back the banished Fusion. In the long term, a body that can come back every turn and recur a resource is good for the grind, but it does come at the cost of playing a bricky level 5. Battle Wasp Rapier. The Onslaught is a level 5 insect that can discard an insect to place not Black Whirlwind from deck, then summon itself, and can banish itself from grave to lower an insect's level by 1. Battle Wasp Wind can search a Battle Wasp twice per turn when a Battle Wasp is summoned, and can let an insect be used as a tuner. Armed Rebellion summons an insect with 1000 or less from deck, then sends a monster you control to the graveyard and locks you to insects. And if your insect Synchro is destroyed, can banish itself from grave to search Summoning Swarm. Sachi the Ceremonial Bow can turn itself into a tuner on summon, and can bounce a continuous spell to give you an extra normal this turn. And Battle Wasp Grand Partisan the Revolution is a generic level 12 that can't be destroyed, boosts insect synchros by 200 for each banished insect, and if it's banished, you can come back, pop cards your opponent controls up to the number of banished insects, and burn 5 for each. I really can't believe they're throwing more extenders at insects. Like, holy shit, Ragnaraka was at least a little more balanced in terms of what it brought to the table. Stag Sovereign is probably the best insect payoff ever. Meanwhile, these cards have concepts of a payoff. A Black Whirlwind and a Sea Moon for Battle Wasp makes that engine more consistent and likely what you want to focus insect combo around going forward. With Rapier, you can get up Wind and immediately trigger it to grab Sting, then trigger the second activation on Sting's normal summon to get 4 wasps on board, easy peasy. And of course, you can reset that soft twice per turn with Sachi to search even more if you want, as well as reopening up the normal summon, so if you need to normal, say, Resonance to get to Rapier, you can still have a normal available for Sting later on. And while Resonance is conveniently on screen, we should talk about Rebellion, which doesn't say Battle Wasp anywhere on it, so I actually almost forgot it existed when writing this segment, but is easily the best consistency piece insects have gotten yet. With over 100 targets, maybe we can circle back to this one on that other show I keep forgetting is really hard and no one actually watches, but the TLDR is that now you can activate Resonance Insect directly from deck. Since it has to send the monster it summons if you activate it on an empty board, the most common target's going to be the ones that want that, like Resonance or Goki Pole, but you can also pair it with a normal summon of Resonance so you can get out something like Sting and get 2 searches on a new chain. Resonance and Sting both search Rapier, so there's plenty of ways to him, and Rapier's Graveyard effect can help clean up the levels a bit to make Sachi. And then there's Grand Partisan. I think the archetypal intent of this card was supposed to be to banish it with Ballista, then bring it back, pop pretty much the whole field, and burn for at least enough that your 2 level 12s can close out the game, but yeah, making 2 level 12 synchros just to kill sounds awful. Even triggering it with something lower investment like Aztekapede sounds like way too much effort. The most obvious thing you'd want from a card like this is a way to trigger it on your opponent's turn, which Insect just doesn't really have. The best way we can really think of is to tribute it with Sting the Poison or Scale Bomber while it's under the influence of Retaliating Sea or Bio-Insect Armor, which in addition to being contrived and inflexible, also forcefully ties 2 of your interruptions together, something I consider a bit of a death knell for end board pieces. If you need to use your Sting Imperm to trigger your Partisan Pop, that's not 2 interruptions, that's 1 singular multi-part interruption. So I think Grand Partisan just doesn't really have a place of any kind in an Insect deck. The only saving grace is that even though these are just more Insect extenders, at least they're pretty good insect extenders. Anyway, I rolled that before the exclusives were revealed, and then they gave insects a new payoff that also banishes an insect monster, so fuck me, I guess. But it's the same multi-step interruption problem we talked about earlier, so Partisan's probably still bad, but this card's good. They made a monster that fusion summons it too, that's a good card. This one's not very good. Ragnaraka, Wisteria of Woe, is a trap monster that summons itself, then if you control Ragnaraka Link, can banish up to 2 cards from your opponent's grave, and can shuffle back 2 rips from your grave or banish during the end phase to reset itself from grave. Our top story, sad news, is Wakero of the Golden Land was found dead last night in its apartment in San Francisco. There's just so much wrong with this card. The only realistic way to search it is Mantis Monk, but it's competing with Hunting Dance for that slot. It's the only rabbit target in the set, but you can't use it generically, and almost every Ragnaraka card locks you out of rabbit. This maybe could have been our way to trigger Partisan, but it only banishes from opponent's grave. The only thing it really has going for it is that it's pretty decent at grinding because it puts an extra body on board for turn 3 and then can be reused after linking it off while recurring some resources along the way. In terms of how this helps the deck find a place in the metagame, I'd say it's somewhere around as helpful as the Valmonica counter trap. Well, that just about covers all. Lock in. TK? The Mimicals are good. What? The Mimicals are good, lock the fuck in. Is that cocaine? I said lock the fuck in! Mimigul Fairy can drop its ass down on your opponent's field or on your field if you control a Mimigul, and if it's flipped, its controller can't activate the effects of monsters summoned from their hand for the turn, then switches teams. Lock in. Armor can set itself on your opponent's field or summon to your field if your opponent controls a monster. The flip effect is bad. Lock in. Slime either sets itself to your opponent's field or summons to yours if your opponent controls a monster, and when it's flipped, your opponent, meaning you, summon a Mimigul from deck, then it switches over. Lock in. Fork makes your opponent either flip up their set monster or send it to the grave to give you 2 draws, and can banish itself from grave to gather your mind. Charm is bad, we're skipping it. Lock in. Mimigul Throne is a rank 1 that takes 2 Mimigul Mimighoul's detaches material to summon master from hand, deck, or graveyard, and can quick effect equip to a master, then bounce a card for each material it has. Giant Mimighoul lets you attack directly but non-exceeds Mimighouls while your opponent has a set monster. Searches a Mimighoul on summon and can detach material to pop face-ups up to the number of your opponent's face-down monsters. Lockin! These cards address the huge problem Mimighoul had with getting bodies on board. All 3 new monsters can pick between giving themselves to your opponent or just jump straight to your own field with pretty generous conditions. Fairy just needs you to control a name, which can be the master that searched it, or Dragon that gets you to it through dungeon. Armor and Slime just need you to have given your opponent a ghoul, but of course Slime can get you yet another name with its flip effect, so if you open Archfiend and Slime, or get them both into position with Maker, you can flip up the Slime, take it back, and summon Dragon, getting you 3 bodies to link or overlay, and a search for a back row to get yet another body or set up Interruption. And by overlaying 2 of them into Throne, you can get to Master for yet still another search, and access to both Master's Flip and Throne's Bounce as Disruption for your opponent's turn. You could also give up the Throne Bounce and overlay with Giant into UDF, giving you something to do with the Giant after making it to search room. Let's talk a bit about Giant, because unlike Throne, he's generic, so you could use some sort of rank 1 engine to start your combos. Maybe 1 Ash, 1 Poplar is a terrible Garnet ratio, but hey, that's life in the marketplace of ideas. More importantly though, you can make either exceeds just by resolving Maker, because whether you summon Archfiend and Dragon to one side of the field or the other, you can get to 2 level 1s to get your combo rolling. Armor's flip effect is kinda ass, but Fairy is a really good lingering floodgate that not only screws with things like Poplar, but also just complements Dungeon very nicely by restricting your methods of playing under its anti-normal summoning floodgate. Fork is alright just because both options are pretty good for you. Most of the time it's just trade in, but that's not nothing. And on top of all that, it's also far easier to keep up the pressure turn 3 and beyond, and to go in for the kill with Throne getting Master up to 4,000 attack, and Giant clearing out parts of the board and doing some pretty sizable burn damage. Historically, every time I make fun of a TCG exclusive deck for needing a strong second wave of support, it's gotten one. So to everyone who got mad at me for the heinous crime of being too right, you're welcome. Fire King Cordier, that's the word I was looking for that one tweet. I kept wanting to say courtesan, but I looked it up and that means something else. Fire King Cordier Volcanic can pop another fire from hand or field on summon to add a fire tri-type from deck to hand and match its level. And when she's destroyed, she summons High Avatar Garunix from deck. This card revitalizes Fire King both as a pure deck and as a Snake Eye variant. As a starter, you can use her to pop any random fire in hand, whether it be Ash Blossom or Flamberge, to search Ponix, who will trigger to summon himself. She then also makes a better pop for Island than Ponix because she'll replace the body you lose from field, and with a level 8 that can be useful for rank 8 plays no less. The level modulation also makes rank 8 plays more attainable, since you can make her an 8 by searching Sacred or Kieran, both of whom can then get to the board almost immediately. So you can more reliably access Photon Lord or Hope Harbinger. She also makes a good option to pop from deck with Sacred if you started with Snash or Ponix, because like Kieran and Arvada, she'll net you another body on board, and that can be used to make Promethean Princess so you can bring back the Volcanics you popped and get the search. And since you can revive her on your opponent's turn with Kieran, you can also use her to start getting follow-up rolling early as well. And I suppose it shouldn't be ignored that although it's kind of a Garnet, returning High Garunix to his natural habitat gives the deck a good option for breaking weaker boards turn 3 by telling everyone to fuck off immediately, and at the very least, forcing 1 negate. Let's rattle off some quick ones, see if we can avoid another 40-minute episode. El Magimergy can quick effect tribute a Cyberse monster or Link monster to summon itself from hand. Kinda like a Sharvara Kieran thing for Cyberse decks. Can protect stuff like Debug and Splash Mage from Imperm if you really gotta resolve them. Also triggers Devotee, that's kinda funny. Wandering Titan of Tardis is a level 9 zombie that upon being sent from deck to grave, wipes your own board, summons himself, and sends cards your opponent controls up to the number of cards sent from yours, and neither player can respond with monster effects. And when it's sent from somewhere else, can pitch a card to send an opponent's card. Neat board breaker that can maybe work with Tier, but probably a bad idea since it's kinda bad if it's not controllable. It does make Unizombie into a pop, so zombie stocks are on the rise. Flying Mary, the Wandering Ghost Ship, is a link 2 of 2 zombies that can bring back a level 5 or higher zombie and push itself into the back row. And while it's there and you control a big zombie, it can pop a monster your opponent controls with lower attack. Left field Balladrock support aside, I don't know how a fairly restrictive Reborn and pop both at ignition speed will work into a restructured zombie deck. Chaos with a K Star Source Dragon is a fusion of a light or dark dragon and any dragon, pops cards on summon up to the number of lights or darks used, and if it's banished can turn a level 4 light or dark dragon into an 8. Decent super poly target, not super generic, but Dragon Link gets eaten alive by it. Since it'll either pop 2 cards or bait and negate after that, it trades with at least 3 of your opponent's cards. Also synergizes with that lad shit we were talking about, because not only can you summon it with the end dragons, banishing it for their summon effects that you turn your small dragons into viable lord materials. Hiosvarog, the Mechanical Dawn, is a fusion of 2 light machines that adds a card that can fusion summon back from graveyard the standby phase after being summoned, and can negate a spell trap by banishing 1 light machine from field or 2 2 from grave. This is a cool payoff for Cyber Dragon or ABC. Probably the best way to make it for each of them is Proxy F. Cyber Dragon might struggle making that many bodies while still making Infinity and all that, but ABC probably has the gas. Gives you a new thing to do with the pieces before turning them into Buster, and gives you a new way to clear the unlinkable Platinum off field. I kind of feel like this card and Union Pilot are both kind of pointless to talk too extensively about until we know when the new Union cards are coming out, which has been thrown into disarray by fears that the Light Pack will be split up like they did to the Earth Pack. Hey, while we're on the topic of fucked up pre-support, they did the Geo Gremlina thing again. Chaotic Alert Queen and Perform Age Ball Balancer are meant to be support for the new cards in Animation Chronicle, which, once again, we don't know when we're getting. I'd like nothing to say about either of these cards. Ball Balancer could pop Flush Fire. There you go. Successful segment. Final Bringer of the End Times is a quick play spell that pops a monster you control and a card your opponent controls. Really cool to see such a simple card design still being able to be printed this late in the game. It's got some neat applications outside of just board breaking, like triggering Unchains and U-Bells. The dream, as the name implies, is to pop a Spend Varadros with it to trigger the additional pop. Since you could set it turn 1, it's honestly quite strong going first and second. And even can be used to dodge Imperm turn 1, since Imperm being on field gives it a target. Maybe it's not main deck worthy, but if the format cooled down a bit to around the power level or Book of Moon was playable, maybe it could be a side deck option. People played Offering to the Doom this decade, anything can happen. Dominus Impulse, okay, now it autocorrected Dominus to Dominic. Summoning a monster is strong, but nothing is stronger than family. Reddit ass joke. Dominic Toretto Impulse. Dominus Impulse is a trap that can be activated from hand if your opponent controls a card, negates an effect that would special summon a monster, destroys it if there's a trap in your grave, and locks you out of light, wind, and earth monster effects for the game if you used it from hand. Curiouser and curiouser. Like Purge before it, Impulse is a, let's call it, half generic hand trap that not only refuses to play nice with some entire decks, but also forces you to give up several other hand trap options like Nib and Veiler. However, unlike Purge, nothing really does what Impulse does. Purge is pretty much objectively outclassed by Ash Blossom, so you typically just play both and hope to not draw any more copies of Ash after resolving a Purge. But there's never been a Solemn Warning hand trap. This is actually an entirely new angle through which to disrupt your opponent, and a really strong one. As we've seen with Rule Colossus and Caesar, negating only effects that special summon is as close to just being an Omni-Negate as it gets. Not being able to play Veiler or Mourner means you'll have even more reason to be on Imperm, which can turn on the Destroy function. Also, since Dark is among the attribute it plays well with, you can even actually use this card as a trap in Labyrinth, which also gives you another way to start playing turn 0 with Lady. From what we've talked about in this pack alone, you can play it in Mermail and Sharks. Tenpai could easily play under it with just a little adjustment to their hand trap lineup, and the concession that they won't get to make Heavenly Spheres if they fail to kill. You could even play it in Snake Eye and U-Bell, which can play almost entirely under Fire and Dark if it weren't for the fact that Fiendsmith existed. That's probably the kicker. A great number of decks that probably could have played Impulse will opt out of it in favor of the Fiendsmith engine. But of course, Fiendsmith has been greatly nerfed already in the TCG, so maybe we shouldn't talk so definitively. I think it depends. Mulcharmy Fualos is a level 4 winged beast that you can discard if you control no cards to draw 1 each time your opponent special summons from deck or extra, and you guys remember how Purulia works, right? I don't really want to explain this shit again. Just like Impulse, this card is kind of asking me to repeat a lot of the same talking points from the last video. Only works if you go second, doesn't draw for every summon, so it's not as many draws. You have to give back some of the cards if you draw too many. So if anyone tries to tell you this is just max C, rest assured it's not quite that strong. But there are still reasons to be concerned. The only thing Purulia can say it has over Fuwawa is that it's better going first, since the only way your opponent is summoning from deck or extra turn 0 is like Impulse? No, not that one. Meanwhile, for its main purpose of going second, not only does it have twice as many sources from which to trigger, both of them are much more valuable. Should go without saying that most decks these days want to run through something like half their extra deck turn 1, and want to summon from deck as much as possible as well. If it only drew for one or the other, I think honestly I'd say it was already a better card. And on top of that, it shares the restriction of letting you use one more Mulcharmy effect this turn, even another copy of itself, meaning you could pretty easily be drawing enough to trigger the end phase shuffle. So it's clear that as an experiment of weakening max C, Konami considered Purulia too weak. But is their second draft too strong? Hard to say, but what I can tell you is that even in the format with 3 max C, now 2, Fuwalos still seems to be a 3-of in everything.
Do you have a Star Lore update?
Goblin Bikers, gone wild!
Sexual style.
Hey, are you horny? Of course you are, jackass!
Fuck you, Baltimore!
Do you want to fuck a goblin? That's right, fuck a goblin!
Kissing goblins, ingratiating goblins, succubus with goblins, in bed with a goblin.
Come on down to Goblin Bikers, gone wild!
Sexual style.
Presented by Dia Belzers.
a subsidiary of Biocom.
To get your dick jorked incoherently by magical sex goblins who work for the government.
The media's covering up!
I'm speaking directly to you. Yes, you! This is the sign you've been waiting for to fuck an evil, scary goblin. Also, liquidate your assets and move to the woods. Yes, the woods! The Bush administration killed a mythical giant in Afghanistan.
The media's covering up!
Come on down to Goblin Bikers, Gone Wild!
Sexual style.
To get big head from Gabonga. We also do COVID vaccinations. Paid for by people for Kamala Harris. Goblin Bikers Gone Wild is a level 6 fiend that can be normal summon without tributing if you control no monsters or only goblins, summons a level 4 or lower goblin from deck on summon, and if it's sent to the graveyard, attaches an opponent's card to a goblin exceeds you control. Goblin Biker Grand Breakout is a quick play spell that tributes a monster to summon a goblin from deck, and when a monster attacks, can banish itself from grave and detach materials from goblins you control to dock all your opponent's monsters by 1,000 for each material detached. And Grand Crisis can banish a goblin from field or grave and one of your opponent's monsters in the same place once each turn, and can send itself to summon back 5 banished goblins. This wave of support addresses the number one problem with Goblin, that none of the goblins are actual starters. Now armed with a tour guide and an emergency, there are some goblins you don't mind drawing. If you normal Doug, you can search Breakout and sack Doug for Gone Wild, which can summon Clatter to bring Doug back and make Gabonga. If you lead with Gone Wild, you can summon Doug from deck and either search Breakout and do the same thing, or search Bash to match or add the levels of Doug and Gone Wild to make a rank 3, 6, or even 9. And since Entrance is still just Rhoda, even if you can't use its extra effect, it can search either of your 2 starters for even more consistency. And Gone Wild also gives you new options for end board pieces, like how anytime he's detached or linked off, he'll suck up one of your opponent's cards onto Gabonga, or how you can bash to make Merciless a level 6 fiend and make Caesar. But more likely you'll be making Caesar and Fiendsmith builds where you can overlay Gone Wild with Engraver or Necroquip. There's even some extra synergy with Fiendsmith since you can make Mellow Melody instead of Closed Heaven and use the 2 materials under it as fodder to summon Bikers before making Requiem. So the consistency and the payoff were both improved, but still neither one really seems sufficient to have much success. More importantly though, this is Memento support. In the OCG, Memento has started playing Grand Breakout because Goblin is a real starter these days. So you can sack a Hand Trap or an Anguish that's in the crossfires of an Imperm to get your little guy and go off. Gone Wild can also summon Memento Goblin from deck, but that sounds awful. Don't do that. Scourge of the White Forest tributes to Synchro to negate a card on the field. Then if you tribute it to White Forest, can reborn and illusion. And if it's sent to activate a monster effect, can set itself. On top of being a hot red that's searchable with Sylvie and Arciella, and thus a viable option for an end board over Woes, which is arguably cuttable because Diabel is a better way to quick summon Silvera anyway, being quick play means it's also a way to dodge Imperm and Veiler on Arciella. And even though losing the body is not great value-wise, Sylvie and Rucia can still shuffle back Synchros from grave, so you can still get that value out of it. And if you tributed Diabel, it can reborn that very same copy back, making it completely costless. In the full context of the deck, none of these are really problems that needed fixing, so where there was a lot of potential for this deck in the last set, this one support card doesn't really capitalize on any of it. The Hallowed Azamina can fusion summon an Azamina by sending 1 Sinful Spoil from your hand or field for every 4 levels it has, and can shuffle back an Azamina fusion from field or graveyard to add itself back to hand. Debtors is a quick play that also fuses Sinful Spoils into Azaminas, and can banish itself from grave to reborn an Azamina. Determination fusions by shuffling back Sinful Spoils, and can be banished from grave to reset a spoil. Azamina Mu Arcielago is a level 6 fusion of an illusion on a light spellcaster that searches an Azamina or a Sinful Spoil card on summon, and on destruction searches a Sinful Spoil spell. Ilia Sylvia can omni-negate by tributing itself, and adds a Sinful Spoils trap on destruction. Solar Isicthon is a fusion of an illusion and a fiend, sends a card on summon, and adds back an Azamina or Sinful Spoils during the standby phase. Azamina Moa Regina is a level 8 fusion of an illusion and a level 6 or higher fiend that can reborn an illusion, and in response to a Sinful Spoil or Azamina being activated, can pop 2 cards. Sinful Spoils Deception can tribute a monster from hand or field to search an Azamina card, steals 1500 of your opponent's life when their monster is sent to the grave while you control an Azamina, and during the end phase can reset itself from the graveyard. And Guilt of the Sinful Spoils can shuffle back a monster your opponent controls when they summon from deck or extra while you control a Diabellstar, and can have an opponent's monster when it battles a Diabellstar. In the OCG, these cards immediately saw play as yet still more gas for Snake Eye. By using Diabellstar to set Deception, you can tribute over her to get Hallowed, and then use Hallowed sending Deception to make Arcielago. Arcielago can then search Original, go back to extra to get back Hallowed, and fuse the original into Ilia Sylvia. So you can use the original to search Snake Eye Ash while protected under Sylvia's Omni. So playing this engine gives you even more starters, as Deception can start this combo as well, and even more protection from hand traps. But it also kinda eats shit to a lot of things. Deception can open you up to Droll. Hallowed gets fizzled by Retaliating Sea. Having to use Original Search instead of Summon means you need to use your normal. All these little things have led to Azamina kinda losing ground as the dominant build over time in the OCG. But that's them and this is us. We don't have Apollo anymore and our Fiendsmith lines are severely weakened. Consistency is in a bit of a bad state. Maybe a new Omni and extra starters are exactly what Snake Eye needs to get back into the swing of things. Anyway, if you want to play all the other cards, go play Chimera. This is a Chimera fusion. You can summon it on your opponent's turn, pop a card. Please don't close the video. Chimera is still real, we swear. We have negate singular. That's my YouTube video. I don't really have an outro because I'm not doing an ARG or whatever anymore. As you may have noticed, the videos are going to go back to being normal. This is what I consider normal. It was fun making something truly meaningful to me as an artist, but was also really hard, so I'm never doing that again. It was fun while it lasted, but feels good to be back on the old grind. Right, TK? Yeah. It does.